Beginner Guide to D&D. Terms, phrases, and materials. First, what is D&D? Dungeons & Dragons is a fantasy tabletop role-playing game. So what does that mean? It's practically an adult imagination game. You can be whomever you'd like and basically do whatever you'd like, but there are repercussions and consequences for all actions, good or bad. The role of the players. So in a Dungeons & Dragons party, there is a Dungeon Master and then player characters, or PCs. The Dungeon Master is the member of the group that leads the storytelling. They make the environment, they play all of the people that you encounter, they write the adventures or plan them, they plan what monsters, and they play the monsters and encounters and other things that you will experience in your campaign or quest. They guide you through the story that you're telling. The player characters then take what the Dungeon Master gives them and they react in character, whether they have to problem solve a situation they're in, strategize an ambush against an enemy or a way to complete a quest, or negotiating with people you come across when you find yourself in a stitch. Dice. So, in Dungeons & Dragons, you can basically do whatever you'd like, but your dice decide your fate. You'll use dice frequently to determine success, failure, or damage if you are making an attack. The number for each dice pertains to the number of sides the dice have. As you can see in this little table, I have laid out all of the dice that you will be using. A set of Dungeons & Dragons dice comes with all of these dice, and you will use all of them frequently. The D20. The 20-sided die is a little bit of a hexagon shape, and you will use this dice probably the most in Dungeons & Dragons. That being said, it will either be your best friend or your worst nightmare. The D20 is what you roll to determine whether you're successful or you fail the things that you want to try to do, whether they be ability checks, attacks, spell attacks, and saving throws, and I'll go into those things later. The D10, or percentile die. So many dice sets come with 2 D10s, or 10-sided dies, one regular and one percentile with a 0 after the number. It's important to know that on a D10, the 0 doesn't mean 0. I know when I first started, I rolled a 0 and I was like, oh my gosh, what? But it's actually the 10 on the 10-sided die, so it's actually a good thing. The percentile dice can either be used as a regular D10 or used to roll a percentage. A D10 and percentile die can be rolled together to serve as a D100 if you don't have one. There may be a table that you find where it says roll a D100 and see what random quirk you might have, but if you don't have one, as a lot of people don't have one, you can just roll a D10 and a percentile die and it will serve the same purpose. The remaining dice, D12s, the D10s as I mentioned, D8, D6, and D4 are used to roll for the amount of damage dealt depending on the weapon or spell. Weapons, spells, or cantrips will specify the damage die you will roll when making an attack. So, for example, I have included a screenshot from D&D Beyond on here of the Great Axe. Under damage, if you can see right here, it calls for 1d12 plus 3. So that means that you get to roll your 12-sided die and add 3 to whatever number you roll. Next, ability scores, or stats. These stats determine the skill set or abilities of your character. They include strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. So what do these mean? Wisdom is a character's willpower, common sense, perception, and intuition. Intelligence is a character's ability to analyze information. A character can be very wise and not very intelligent. Charisma is a character's force of personality, including persuasiveness and sociability, their ability to interact with other characters or monsters or things like that. Strength is a character's physical power. Constitution is a character's endurance, health, and stamina. Dexterity is a character's agility, hand-eye coordination, reflexes, and balance. And a different combination of the numbers of these things will make up what your character is good at. Ability checks are instances where you will roll your 20-sided die that I mentioned at the beginning and add the appropriate ability modifier that you will have on your sheet to determine how successful you are at the action you are taking. For example, when you enter a room, you can make a perception check to determine what you're able to notice about it. Having high wisdom means you have high perception and you're able to notice little details that other characters might not. Saving throws are used to determine whether magic, poison, or other types of attacks will affect a player character or other creature. You will roll a d20 for this as well. Depending on your stats or race, you may have added bonuses to saving throws, and it will specify on D&D Beyond if you make your character there. So in this kind of a situation, if someone makes an attack on you and they attack with a poison dagger, you would make a saving throw against whether the poison affects you. Next, these are some common abbreviations that you will hear people say or you will see on sheets just to help you understand what they mean. So DM means Dungeon Master. I specified what that was at the first slide. PC means a player character. It's the players that are participating in the party. That's what PCs are. NPCs are non-player characters, and these are the people that the Dungeon Master creates and will play throughout your encounters. DC is a difficulty class. This is a number. So for saving throws, like I mentioned in the previous slide, there will be a number that you have to roll higher than in order to evade the poison in that situation. This is what the DC will be. So when saving throws are involved, the DC will be listed in your spell or in your cantrip or in your weapon, and so whoever's making the saving throw has to roll higher than 12, for example, and if they roll lower than 12, then they take the additional damage for the poison. AC means armor class. This is how much armor you have. So if you have less armor, then your armor class will be lower. When making an attack, you roll your d20, and the number that you're rolling has to be higher than someone's armor class, or you don't hit them at all. Hit points, HP. You've probably heard HP somewhere if you played Pokemon on a DS or something when you were little. It's basically your health. And when you roll for damage, you subtract that from your hit points. It's how many points of damage you can take, or how many hits you can take. GP is gold pieces. This is the currency. There are also SP, silver pieces, copper pieces, platinum pieces that you will either be rewarded for completing missions or you might find as loot somewhere and stuff like that. So yes, I hope that this was helpful as a general introduction to D&D and how to play a little bit. Thank you, and I will be making more videos. Thank you so much.